Hello guys, welcome back. See you guys there. Let's see, let's start this thing. I'm glad everybody's there and safe. And we're still in quarantine, right? Just my pajamas again the whole day. But I took a shower, so there's that. Okay, so continue what we were doing yesterday. So like I mentioned before, my intention was to actually fill up those areas like the chin and cheeks and everything. And I ended up like doing a lot of it, right? So I kind of like, basically like you can see the marks on the sides right here. You see like the little circles in there, and then those are the little gaps. And those are basically the same thing in here, but just like with the little gaps filled with individual little pores, right? And then as I mentioned yesterday, I mean, like if you look at something like this, everything looks, it has the same pattern, you know? Although it's not very mechanical because I'm trying to avoid those lines, like I mentioned yesterday, make it a little bit more random. It's still pretty much like the same texture all the way across, and that doesn't sell the skin as being something more realistic. Like I mentioned before, I mean, like because she's older, I might have to actually erase a lot of this stuff. But then you can, if you remember that trick that I showed you guys yesterday, for example, like saving a morph target for this, if you save a morph target at this point right now that you have the pores in both sides, you can do the opposite operation, right? So basically, like I could save potentially the pores, the morph target with the pores like this, and then I could go to my smooth strong, like I showed you guys yesterday, smooth out a good chunk that I don't, you know, an area where I don't need a lot of those pores, and then slowly I can just blend back the pores, right? So as an exercise here, I can just do this. I can go to, I'm just gonna go to solo. Basically, like if I go solo, it's gonna isolate just what's HD, right? So at least there is no confusion. And I'm gonna go to my morph target, and I'm gonna store it right here. So at this point, let's say if I select the light box brush and then go to my smooth stronger, right? Now, if I go, for example, like to an area like the nose right here, they're gonna start to blend this area better, right? See what I did around the eyes in here, start to blend everything a little bit more, right? So I can actually use like a low intensity for my smooth. So let's see, like around 6 or something. And then I'm gonna go and then I blend it back right here. For example, I can go, in this area, I can go very strongly, actually. Just try to eliminate. If it's not going away, I can go one subdivision level lower and then just make sure that we really smooth it out. Something like that. So let's eliminate this all together like that. All right, I'm gonna go one subdivision level higher, and then I'm gonna see some stuff is still in there. Now, it's just a little shallower. And then now what I can do, for example, if I wanna plan to do like a nice little blend in here, I can switch back to my morph brush. So morph, just press M. And then I can use like a very low intensity, like 3, for example. And slowly I can start like bringing back some of those guys, you know. In case you need to blend stuff back, you know. Just like that way you have more control over it, right? So I can actually do like a nice little blend, you know, just for the areas. For example, like this is gonna be important for an area like around the nose. We're gonna start getting a little bit more spread out, just like I did here with under the nose, right? Like spreading out the pores a little bit more. And then under the eye bags, you're gonna start seeing more and more wrinkles blending into those little pores until they completely disappear. So we're gonna be doing some of this blending today, and also exploring some of the how you approach now, for example, like the mid-resolution details, the secondary forms, when you already have this kind of stuff in place, right? Remember I mentioned that it's important to keep the symmetry all the way until we fill those areas with the pores, right? So that means that this whole area here, I can start breaking the symmetry now because the pores are in place. So that means I'm not gonna have to resculpt the pores in both sides anymore, right? So I can actually start like breaking up this stuff, you know, it's very symmetrical right now, and then and get some nicer detail in there. So let's do some explorations today. Between today and tomorrow, we're gonna be just sculpting stuff, and I'm gonna be showing you like eye bags, you know, it's like the texture for the nose, the lips, and then all the directional stuff. So it's gonna be cool because you're gonna be kind of like hands-on doing sculpting, which is really cool. And instead of like just talking theory and explaining without actually doing anything. So my reference, she is looking like this, right? That's like the wrinkles I'm gonna go for. I might take some liberties in here, but for the most part, I'm gonna try to reproduce fairly well like the patterns that she has in here. Try to get the directions and everything. So let's just bring this to the side here. So I have more space, and I'm just gonna zoom in here on my other monitor, and I'm gonna start doing some sculpting here and showing you guys what I mean with by the, you know, sculpting the secondary stuff. So there is a brush in here. I don't know if you guys use it a lot, but this was introduced by a friend from Ireland back in the day, Frank Gravatt. He actually showed me this elastic brush, right? And the elastic brush looks very weird at first. It's the kind of brush that you test one time and then it looks funny and you kind of abandon it because like, oh, this is not useful for me, right? Because it does this kind of stuff, you know. It looks very funky, right? So if you click dragging, you know, it just do this weird thing. Now, if you reduce the default intensity, which is like 87, if you reduce to something around like 30 or so, now it starts getting more interesting. Still, if you go over the same area, it keeps building this little weirdness, right? But the cool thing about this brush is that if you use in the same direction every time, for example, like if you do one pass and another pass on top and another one like that, you keep building up things, the forms, without destroying anything that's underneath it. So for example, like if you have already sculpted pores like this, and then you want to add like incorporate some forms in here, look what happens. So for example, like if I do a pass, multiple passes here, look at the pores. They're just conforming to it and writing on top of that new surface in there, but without destroying any of the detail, right? Let's see in comparison to something like the standard brush, for example. So let's go back to the standard here, and let's see what the standard does. So the standard, if you do like multiple passes on top of the same area, it ends up like destroying the form, right? Like all those pores start getting very tiny like that, and everything gets smoother around it. So the cool thing about the elastic brush is that if you want to sculpt, for example, at the highest level like this, and still add some detail, like secondary detail, you can do that. And then obviously another way to do it is to use like your clay build-up with a little alpha 35 or 36 in there, and then go a couple of subdivision levels lower than this, and you start actually sculpting around here. So in her case, she has a couple of like those major wrinkles in there. So I can do a combination of both. I can sculpt the wrinkles first, just blocking. So I'm gonna block something starting from around here. Just gonna go and try to not go like in a single straight line. So a little bit more broken, like maybe like in 3 parts or so. I'm gonna change some direction around here. So I have a deeper line in there, right? The cool thing about doing this is that, you know, it's like you can really build up like some interesting volumes that way. The interesting thing about my reference is that she has like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parallel lines. But the thing is, like if you sculpt like parallel lines, normally it looks fake. In her face, she actually has it. But I'm gonna try to avoid that, just to, you know, to prevent this whole thing about like, oh, it looks CG because everything is parallel. So I did it like 2 in parallel here. So the third one, I'm probably gonna break a little bit more of a diagonal, and then try to break up more, you know, towards like maybe like 2 different forms in here instead of like just one, just to prevent like this, you know, cadency in there, like kind of like, you know, like I said yesterday, I mean, like the eye tries to go towards like the repetitions, right? It's like we're trained to do. This one here, she has a deeper one in here. I'm gonna sculpt. So basically, like I'm using like I'm at 500,000 polys right now. So it's like the lowest level before HD, right? So this is equivalent to the lowest level of my HD in here. And then she also has a line that breaks up this whole little profile in here. So I'm just gonna dig a little deeper in there. And then, so now I can actually start exploring some of those forms and trying to refine them. I'm gonna build up a little bit more around here, just to try to match what I see in there. I'm gonna make like this area here a little deeper so I can dig it. And always like in the resolution that's not too high, right? Kind of like this resolution looks kind of perfect for this kind of stuff. So you're just gonna dig some, carve some areas in here. And then same around there. And then now I'm just like blocking like the position of those wrinkles first, trying to get like slightly kind of like writing on top of some of the wrinkles in there, but without being too perfect. And then when I get to this area here, I'm gonna start actually adding more and more lines. We're gonna have like a lot of tiny little lines that go around it, around the lips, but we're gonna be building this slowly. Around here, sometimes what you get like some of those lines starting to blend and going kind of like in different directions. So for example, like from here, you get some of them breaking towards the cheeks. And those are basically like just like some rough ones. And they're gonna be almost like a secondary forms in here. Not quite yet because they're kind of shallow. But as soon as I start building up some of this stuff, like right now, for example, let's build up like those in-betweens here. There's some little pockets that look a little bit more inflated than others. Just gonna build it around here. Keep going towards the lip. And then I'm gonna actually go over the lip just slightly, but not a lot. I don't wanna create like a huge bump in there. Same around here. I'm gonna find like some areas that I can actually bulge to have these little pockets, you know, instead of like all the same thickness. The important thing is to always try to stay away from your OCD, you know. I'm a little bit OCD as well, but it's an exercise you learn over time, you know. It's like you have to actually fight that. If you see something that's too repetitive, break that repetition, you know. It's like if it's like a pattern that you're starting to see almost like a mathematical kind of thing, just break it, you know. Try to come up with a line that actually goes in a different direction, or, you know, it's like if it's porous, like try to incorporate some variation in sizes and positioning as well. Anything that helps to create a little bit more chaos in here, you know, it's always good, you know. It's like it kind of breaks up this impression that everything is calculated and handmade, right? It has to you know, it's like it has to look organic, like something that was created by nature. Which is a funny thing, right? Like we talk about nature and we talk about chaos and things being unorganized and chaotic. In nature, at first you see a lot of chaos, right? Everything is like very chaotic. Like you look at some forms, everything is chaotic. But then you break things into like a macro level, right? Like a tiny little microscopic part of it, and everything looks so organized, right? Like you've seen those pictures of like snowflakes and things like that, you know. It's like everything is so perfectly mathematical, you know. It's like the 6 sides that you see in those shapes in the snowflakes is quite fascinating. Everything is very, very organized. So chaos is just in the surface, right? Like it's the same thing we are doing here. We're trying to create those lines breaking up in a kind of like chaotic way, you know, so it doesn't look too repetitive. But if you go like to a microscopic level, right, you're gonna see a lot of cells that are basically like copies of each other and like clusters and, you know, very, very similar stuff going on. Like there's always a little matrix going on in there. So yeah, so at this point here, if I went too far with some of those forms, I still can go, you know, as I can smooth out a few things. Not with the super smooth here though. I'm gonna go like lower, or like 4. I'm gonna try to smooth out a little bit. And if I don't want to lose any of those little pores in here, because at this point I'm smoothing out the pores as well, they're going to come back because I'm at the lowest level. But if I want to make sure that I'm not eliminating any of them, I can go back to my elastic brush, which is right here. And I can plug an alpha again, like a 37 or so. And then with this guy here, I can actually use a reverse version of it. Let's turn off this thing. A reverse version of it and just like deflate some of those areas. And always like try not to cross over the same spot, like in circles like this in the same spot. You always do like 1, 2, 3, 4, pass on top of the same thing like multiple times. Space like multiple passes. And that way you can actually really bring things out, you know. Try to even this area here. So now we're going to go to a higher level. And it's almost like we are playing like with fractals here, right? We're defining some secondary stuff. And then if you go to a higher level like this, now they look very soft, right? So kind of like it's organic, but it doesn't have a look that we want here. So I'm going to be starting to break this into like sharper lines. So I'm gonna go with the connected dots game that I showed you guys yesterday. So basically like pick some of those little pores and start connecting them and making a little bit of a sharper line in the middle. So now I'm working asymmetrically, right? Because I already put the pores in both sides. So there is no reason for me to keep symmetrical if I want to create something that looks more naturalistic. So I'm just going to go.
Chris?
Yes.
Sorry, are you working in the Geometry HD or on your the base mesh?
This is all HD.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, like now I'm at 32 million polygons right there, but I can go as low as 500,000 polys in this model at this point. If I go to the lowest resolution of my HD, you know. That's the cool thing about HD. You still have access to multiple levels. You cannot go all the way to the subdivision level 1 because that's basically you only have access if you get out of HD. But you can go as low as the highest level of your non-HD subdivisions. So when I get around this area here, I don't have a lot of reference for this lady here, but I have the picture, the super high res of the, you know, that photographer was looking yesterday. So if you look at this area here, you see the pores, they start blending into little lines. And then those lines, they go all the way around, right? You're gonna get lots of those little tiny lines and they're gonna start blending more and more with the pores themselves. So what we're gonna try to do now is to add some of those starting around here. So at this point here, I can, as long as I keep the center asymmetrical, I can go very symmetrical with the other lines in there because at some point we're gonna make everything asymmetrical like the bigger forms, like the primary ones. But at this point here, if I wanna go, for example, let's go to my subdivision, to my smooth here. Let's make it very big. Let's go to 100. I wanna smooth out that whole area. It wasn't subdivided enough before at the lowest levels. And then now let's sculpt a little bit of those little lines. So I'm gonna turn on my symmetry again so I can sculpt both sides. And let's find a sweet spot here for the intensity that I need. This one looks a little too intense. So let's go to something a little softer, maybe like around 12. That looks better. So I'm gonna be actually starting from some of those pores and dragging them down. So basically I'm gonna start from there. And gonna play that game, the connected dots, and trying to, from time to time, get out of this pattern that looks a little bit too parallel, right? Like I was mentioning before. So I'm gonna go like towards each other and then a little bit more separate, create some diagonals in there. And then from time to time, you pick one of them and you kind of like extend it. You start like pulling them a little bit more further down, you know, it's like or up. So at this point here, we're sculpting symmetrically because I don't want to do the job twice, right? Around here. And then I'm just trying to work smart with the amount of work that I'm going to need to afford all the detailing here. So you guys are free to actually break the symmetry the way you want to do it. But I mean, I try to actually be optimal with this. You know, it's like if I know this area here can be fairly symmetrical, as long as I keep like a buffer in the middle that I can create some asymmetry in there, the eye probably is not going to catch that, especially when I start making the bigger forms asymmetrical, then things are gonna get a little bit more interesting. And then here, at this point, it's just like boring detail, like in terms of direction. But then we're gonna start actually trying to come up with some other detail that's actually starting to come like from the outside in here. I'm gonna turn off my symmetry in here just to make sure I don't make things too symmetrical. And I'm gonna connect again some of those dots in there. And I'm gonna start making those lines coming more towards this area. And it's the kind of stuff, again, you know, it's like if I'm explaining to you guys, it's gonna take me longer, right? Because I have to do the sculpting and the thinking here. And especially like when you're speaking a language that's not your native language, your brain kind of go in overload. But if I'm just sculpting, you know, it's like on my own and with some nice music playing, I can do this stuff fairly fast. You know, it's like you can go through a big area very fast. It's just very fluid. So you see, like I'm starting to add some directionality with those lines, with those pores, by just digging and connecting ones to the other ones, you know, kind of going. But respecting this line, for example, if I force it here, respecting this direction, you know, kind of coming from there to the center like that, but like very slowly carving them. And then on top of that, we can always use that little brush, which is like the skin random that I showed you guys yesterday, and use it as a directional kind of thing. So if I use like intensity, let's see, 8, I can just get some of that, like tiny little ones, kind of like coming the same direction, you know. Those ones gonna be important around this area here as well. So let's sculpt some of that. We're gonna do like symmetry again. And I'm gonna incorporate some of those around here. So for example, from here, let's look at the reference here. For example, this old lady. She's not even that old. But you see like the way that they start like to go around here. So basically like there is it follows this direction in here. So basically like it flares from there to here in an arc like that. And then from here, they're gonna start like crossing over. So we're gonna try to do something like that. So we're gonna add some direction by just going around here and just like painting some of that over this. And just to understand that the principle in here is kind of similar to the principle I mentioned with for the elastic brush. So this brush here, for example, is based on the standard brush, right? So that means that as I sculpt, slowly it's going to start destroying the forms that are underneath, right? Like the pores and everything. But nothing stops you from creating like a brush that does the same thing, but it's based on elastic. So for example, you would do this. You would get to an elastic brush. Around like that. They're gonna clone it before I destroy it. So clone it. And now I can actually plug the same alpha 58. I can do that little tweak I did yesterday, which was the blur. I brought it down 6, so it gets a little sharper. And I can switch this one to spray and go like to a very low flow and placement. Let's see if this one is doing. Yeah, it's good. So basically it's the same brush, but instead of like destroying the pores, I can actually create something that that just like works much better with the detail, you know? So for example, if I go very strongly here, you're gonna see it's gonna be a mess. Yeah, this is like, it's too strong, right? So it's actually destroying the stuff, but let's try with the less intensity a little bit. Let's try 26. So you see like this kind of stuff is gonna try to preserve the pores in between, you know? You're gonna carve them, but it's gonna be using the elastic to do it. So it's your option, you know. It's like I normally like to use the standard because on purpose you kind of blend some stuff together. But you know, I might save this one and just give it a try, you know. It might work fine as well. So let's try to do like with a smaller intensity, maybe like 17 and a smaller size as well. Let's try it like this. And let's go over around here. Maybe even more intensity, let's see. Yeah, it's interesting. Just like, it's very similar. It's just adding a little bit more, keeping a little bit more of the form of the pores individually. So I might keep this one. It's something that I never do, but I'm gonna keep this one and sculpt with it. So at least it preserves things a little better. Around that area, I got a little bit of a leak in there, but I'm not concerned because not gonna be concerned because we are doing a lot of randomization in here, and this whole area is going to be affected by it. So when I get around here, I'm going to start going around more towards the chin now, kind of like that, wrapping around. So basically like it does this, you know, arc like that. And now we got all those little lines that I can actually use in areas like even here, you know, coming from the outside towards the inside. I have to eliminate that one. You know, all this stuff I can start actually incorporating some more direction and stretching, because the skin has to be very stretchy, right? I'm gonna incorporate some of that in the muzzle area here. Otherwise, everything looks like a orange peel, like I said. You know, it's like it looks like there's not a lot of interesting change in directions or anything. So around here, I'm gonna flare it out, basically like start from the middle and then go outwards. I can actually mask this if I want to actually preserve this, but let's just mask it for now. And then let's just go over those lines. And it's the kind of stuff that looks very subtle, you know, but when you have the specular actually hitting those areas, it's sometimes it adds a very nice effect, you know. It's like the way that the specular is going to break, it adds more realism to it. But it's a matter of like really, you know, trying to incorporate like more direction, like from in many different parts of the face, like including here, for example. I could go around here and just like start flaring out like that, following the direction of this whole saggy tissue in here, right? Add some more of that texture. And eventually, because of the pores are so visible for her, and it might not, you know, work very great for an old lady. So I might have to actually go to a few subdivision levels lower than this and get rid of some of them, you know. Or I can just keep working with those little lines and use the standard instead of this one and make sure that is destructive, and I can eliminate some of the pores in the process. So I'm gonna go around here, and then I'm gonna turn off my symmetry and start bringing them down. And I even do a little bit bigger. Just incorporate some texture, you know, and then keep going the same direction you're planning before, kind of like starting to flare out here. And then now we can actually go from the opposite direction. I can actually create like a crisscross kind of effect in there by basically like bringing this direction here, following this direction. So I'm gonna go around there.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
So I have a question right now. So everything is kind of like even in depth. Are
Yep.
you gonna eventually have a pass of pushing some of those out and like having some of them in as well?
Yes. So there is one that there is a brush I can show you guys. This is an elastic with a drag rectangle, and that one I use to actually create depth. So I'm gonna go like I pick a couple of different pores and I add some more depth to it. And then we have another pass that's just like bumps and bruises and little scars, you know. Yeah, at the end we're gonna have a lot of stuff going on, but it starts very even, you know. It's like it's easier to control if it's very even like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna go through that. So let's go back to our wrinkles in here, because I'm starting to, you know, every time I start doing those micro wrinkles, I get like tempted to go one step beyond, you know, so I can create like a little bit bigger ones and then a little bit bigger and bigger. And then all of a sudden you have that fractal effect, right? Like the forms they're gonna get like bigger and bigger. So I'm gonna go to the lowest level in here. And I think I'm gonna eliminate some of that, this lumpiness in here. I'm gonna just like, with the clay build up, very slightly eliminate some of those forms. Make sure that the forms are clear, you know. Otherwise, it gets too busy, you know. It start getting like too busy and lumpy. And then when the light hits those areas, it doesn't look like a clean form, you know. So although I like having them in there because it really breaks the, you know, the CG look, I have to be able to control them. So I'm gonna just clear it up a little bit, and I'm gonna sculpt my detail based on the reference in there. So I'm gonna go, the first one is gonna be a line that she has around here. Oops, too strong. Let's try 17, I think that's what I had. And then, so I'm gonna start from here. And this line here is gonna be a little straight, and I'm gonna break it up more towards here. So maybe like come with the parallel one a little bit lower, like that. And then the other one's gonna be around, probably like has to be a little higher than what I have in there before. So let's do this one, and this one is gonna have some extra cuts going in the opposite direction. So I'm gonna go here, and this one is gonna start coming towards the chin, like that. And then some of those, you're gonna get like a one in here that's breaking up this line. So basically like it becomes a different pocket in here. I'm gonna cut it around there. I'm gonna go all the way around here. And we're gonna refine as we go to the highest levels. But for now we need to block them. So actually you need to And the thing is, like, because everything is idealized in a way, right? Like I'm actually using that lady for a lot of my reference, but you know, it's like the kind of stuff I like doing is just like, if I try to nail like wrinkle by wrinkle and all this stuff, then it becomes a little bit too technical for me. You know, it's like, I would rather, you know, it's like, if that's the case, actually project things, you know, it's like, yeah, use the picture and then project and get the wrinkles right in the correct spots. But in this case here, I'm using it as an inspiration for my creation here. So like a lot of the wrinkles going to be doing, for example, around the eye bags. There are times I completely ignore whatever I have as a reference and I just go with whatever I have in my mind, you know. So it's going to be similar in here. I'm going to be blocking some of the major stuff because I want to have some reference, and then probably going to wing a lot of this, you know. So this one's here, she has some of them, they start actually crossing over. And with older people, you're going to start seeing like some of those triangles, you know, it's like going to get some of them, they're going to go over each other. And then, so around here, she has one that's pretty much like, goes around here and then cuts around there. And then this one has multiple cuts. So we're going to have like one wrinkle like that. And then the other one is going to cross over just like I have in there. And they are not straight. They have like a lot of wobble in here. This area I'm going to carve a little bit deeper. And then I can just smooth out with a very low smooth around here. And slowly we're going to be building up this entire area. Now, when I get to this area around here, I'm going to use a, sometimes if I need to sculpt like some secondary forms at this point, I use my carve brush, but with a very low intensity, for example, in a bigger brush, a bigger size for the brush. So for example, if I go to 4 for intensity and I use a big brush in here, I'm going to do it like very big here. You're going to see it, right? So if I can go even lower than this, let's try like at 2. So at 2, I can carve over those wrinkles and create like something that's a little bit bigger. And it's very subtle, you know, but you can really, if I do many, many times here, for example, around this area, you're going to start carving there, see? But the thing is, like, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this pass very subtle. For example, get like some areas like around the nose in here, just carve around here. Same for here. And just like with a very, very low intensity in a large brush and a very pointy brush, I can actually carve more and more of my secondary stuff. For example, around here in the nose, let's dig this a little bit more. So I add some sharpness in there without going too crazy with intensity. It's very, very subtle detail, you know. Same for those major wrinkles in here that we are describing here. We're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna carve them around there with a bigger brush. So like you can do in multiple ways, you know, it's like you can do by blocking them like I did before and then building stuff up on top, or you can actually come, you know, it's like with a very, very soft brush like this and start like breaking up all those bigger forms, you know, it's like into smaller forms slightly. And then let's go back to, this was just like a parenthesis in there. Let's go back to my sculpting of those wrinkles around here. So around here, I'm gonna sculpt some of them going a little bit more in parallel. So I'm gonna go a little bit longer around here and then gonna break up and then start a new one in there. So they are not like the same.
Hey Chris?
Yes.
Sorry. When you mentioned a second ago that sometimes you like just ballpark it. When you're going for like a real like likeness, generally ballpark it, or you like project and like draw over it?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, like when we do this type of work, like in the studio, right? Like it's a bunch of people involved. So we get like someone who's in charge of just projecting the textures, for example. And it's like, it's the kind of work that I'm not interested in, you know? So if I'm doing something like, if you notice like any of my likeness portraits that I have posted, I mean, like none of them are greatly realistic, you know? It's like they're maybe the shader is realistic and stuff, but in terms of proportions, there is always a little level of stylization because I try to idealize a lot of this stuff, you know? So I definitely wing it for the most part, you know? It's like I use it as a reference. And I try to understand, for example, okay, so now I got a grasp of what's the direction that is expected for this type of skin and what's the flow of it and everything. And then all the in-betweens I fill up with like my understanding of how things work, you know. It's almost like once you learn about like the structure of the skin, you know, it's like, or at least like how to idealize it, then it becomes very fun, you know. It's like it's a much less technical thing, and I think it's more artistical or more artistic than simply like what we do in the studio, you know. It's like that's why I think I enjoy those classes, because I'm not married to doing something that's pretty boring, you know. It's like if you're just projecting stuff, it becomes very, very technical. It's almost like if you read some of my posts like in the past, like at CG Talk or something, I always like was very critical about portraits, you know, because the thing is like people are using a lot of projection, and the scans start being used a lot, right? Like all of a sudden people are using lots of scans and stuff. And I got very critical because it was like, okay, what's the fun of it, right? But then once I figured it out that the fun is actually in the imagining the in-betweens, you know, it's like imagining those forms and just trying to understand how things work in the real life, and going from that point, things got much more fun. So it opened up like a huge thing of like possibilities for me. You know, it's like, so when I'm doing those portraits, I always get into some trouble sometimes. Every single one of them brings a different type of challenge, but it's always cool to overcome and do that like in a kind of like instead of like a cheating, not cheating, but you know, using something that is ready-made, is to actually try to figure out, you know, it's like how can I make it work with just with like common tools, you know. It's like and how far I can push like the realism, you know, with the time that we have, of course. Each one of those portraits, if I could spend like more time in them, I would definitely be able to push them forward. But every time I have like a little time, you know, it's like a little, for example, I'm going to end this class. I'm going to teach one in April to the Brazilians, you know, it's like have one in Portuguese. But then after that, I'm planning to actually take a break of maybe a couple of months, you know, before teaching the next one. And then I might be able to actually revisit some of my portraits and then push them forward. But it's going to be the same deal, you know, not going to try to wing it for the most part. Just like, again, like trying to understand what's the language I'm seeing in the reference, and then just trying to incorporate, you know. It's yeah.
Cool. I have to say they definitely look realistic.
Yeah, I mean, like if you look closely, not so much, but I mean, like some of my students, man, you look at the work done by Sefki, you know, and then you look at the work by Marlon, you know, those guys are badasses before they took my class, so I cannot take any credit. And a lot of the stuff that they do, they don't even use the same techniques I use, you know. It's like, or that I was teaching during class, they have their own stuff figured it out, and they look quite amazing, you know. And then Sefki, I think he was using a lot of you know, scans before. He was cleaning up scans and everything. But his last one that he did, like the Jim Carrey one, that one he's actually doing apparently by hand. So that looks really cool, you know. It looks much more realistic than my stuff. He's a very technical guy. I mean, like you see like the way that he breaks up like all the making of stuff, and it's like all pristine, you know. It's like the way that he goes over the you know, like the shader creation and all that stuff. It's really, really awesome, you know. I think my approach is more loose in a way, you know. It's like because I want to have fun with it, but his is much more controlled, you know. It's like it's really cool stuff. I'm jealous of how controlled he is, but the thing is, like, he's young. I'm an old fart. I had my share of patience in the past, you know. It's like doing stuff like, but now it's just like I just want to have fun creating stuff, and if I can trick some people, you know, it's like with African guys, some people, like when I was in the progress, like some people, oh, it looks pretty real. Even at work, man, like showing to some of my TDs in there, they're like, oh man, it looks very realistic. I was like, I can see the problems in it, you know. I can tell like I could definitely push that much further. But yeah, eventually I'm gonna try to, if I go for a series of portraits that I want to have printed, for example, let's say like for a, try to go for like a little exhibition or something, you know, like some of my friend artists have, which is kind of like a dream to me, you know, it's like have some stuff exposed or exhibited. And then would be cool, you know, to have all those guys like nicely sculpted, you know, it's like with a nice pass that brings the realism a little bit further, and then have them in a gallery. That would be really cool.
Do you ever print?
I never print, man. You know, it's like I have all this thing about making my models all watertight with the intention of printing, like 3D printing all of them. but I end up like not doing it. I have like a Form 2 in my garage for like a year and a half. It's not being used at all, and I feel terrible about it because you know, it's like I had to convince my wife back in the day, like spend this chunk of money, and I was like, and now it's not being used. So yeah, not proud.
I did the same thing. I bought a printer and I used it for about 6 months, and I printed like everything that I made, and then I just stopped.
Oh man, what's up with us, man?
Lazy.
Same
here. What's going on? I got viruses and kids, and
I know, man. We have like other priorities, right?
Everybody else is like on coronavirus like vacation from their work. I'm stuck at home with 2 kids now that don't have daycare.
I know, dude. Like, and now, yeah, we have the 2 kids as well. We have a 6 and a 9-year-old. And my wife is being a hero right now because she's like homeschooling them. And I'm actually working for ILM remotely. So I have to actually, you know, sit my butt in here and work during the day. But then she's taking on everything else, you know, it's like, and she's doing awesome. She cooked a nice Irish dinner. She's like from an Irish family. So today was St. Patrick's Day, right? And then, yeah. So yeah, it was nice.
Similar boat, except for I'm the one that stays at home.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I work from home as well.
So you freelance?
Yeah, I freelance at the moment.
Yeah. You know, it's like that's one thing that I never did. I'm like almost 50 and I never freelanced. I mean, like I did freelance on the side, but like with the full-time job being like the main source of, you know, of money. But I don't think, I think I'm such a pussy, you know, I was like, I would be very, you know, kind of like afraid of not getting getting paid, because we know those cases that people sometimes don't get paid. And yeah, I would be very afraid of that. But I really admire people like who actually build their own, you know, they have their own list of clients and they get like steady source of income from freelance. You know, it's like I have some friends doing freelance like for many years and they are doing pretty well, you know. It's just like I'm a pussy, I don't know.
I don't do that well. I just I'm like in between. I work down in San Jose, but I live in Pleasant Hill. So the commute was just too much for me. It was like 3.5 hours round trip.
Yeah, I try to convince my wife from time to time, like, let's leave California, you know, let's get to a cheaper place, you know. We have a good amount of equity in our current home, so we could potentially like buy and pay off a nice house somewhere like cheaper, you know, and still have a good chunk of money for kids' college. But the thing is, like, to convince her to get out of California is not an easy feat. I mean, like, we have our friends and everyone here, and the kids go to school, have their friends in here too, so it's hard, you know. But I dream of having like a small like wood shop in a little farm, you know, somewhere.
Come to Canada, man.
It was that?
Said come to Canada.
Yeah, to Canada. Yeah, maybe.
The White North, man.
The White North. It's so expensive too, right?
Yeah, it's expensive there too.
Yeah, like I'm in Toronto and it's nuts.
It's nuts.
It's crazy.
Right? Yeah,
I'm in Vancouver and it's fucking insane here.
Yeah, man, I heard about that stuff. I mean, like, California and this area here, Bay Area, is super expensive. But like I said, I mean, like, I got so lucky, you know. It's like all the investments I made in the past, like when I was a banker and all that stuff in Brazil. When I brought my money to the United States, the exchange rate was almost 1-to-1. So I got a good chunk of money. So we put a big down payment in the house. So it really helped with the whole thing, you know, and put together like the fact that the apartment I had in Brazil actually bought like when they are in when the apartment was in construction, and then double the price when we sold it. And the house that we bought here was a short sale, and then it doubled the price as well in about 7 years. So yeah, man, like I got lucky with a lot of the investments, you know. It's like, and the money really built up. So like it's a good situation for us to be like in terms of we can do stuff, you know. It's just a matter of like, okay, let's wait until the shit really hits the fan and then see what we do, you know. But I have this thing as a plan B, you know, like if everything goes to shit, you're just like, okay, let's sell this house and get something cheaper, some other place, and, you know. But yeah, always planning.
Equity is like how I bought a house in Oakland that like immediately went up. That was like new development. And then I own this house now in Pleasant Hill that immediately went up. Like, really, I can't move. So
Yeah.
I got to find a job in San Francisco where I can bark to it.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so stressful, man. Like,
where it's at.
Yeah, it's very stressful, man. If it wasn't for me, like working for like 16 years of my life in a freaking bank, I would not have the, the cash that I had to put down, and also the investment in the apartment that I had in Brazil. So it's a combination of things, It's like some people get lucky sometimes, and sometimes it's just like going by feeling as well. It's like I have now probably like it tanked, but for example, my 401k at some point I was really into looking at the balance between stocks and bonds, and investing to the right things in there, making like 16% a year and everything. But then now with this whole coronavirus thing, I think everything's gonna tank. We're gonna go through a crisis of all the stocks and bonds, and then let's see in a few months where that whole thing lands, But it doesn't look good right now.
Buy up now. I worked for, that's what my original degree was in.
Oh man.
Jeez. Marketing and finance, and
stressful.
Apple Group for like 3 years and hated it.
Yep. Yeah, man. It's like I posted it the other day on my Facebook. I mean, like, to me, the main concern is not even with the virus itself, because I mean, like, it's definitely going to kill a bunch of people. It's like, but we went through other pandemics in the past, and the human race survived, right? Like, many times. But the aftermath to me is more concerning when it comes to all the economic aspects. It's like what this is gonna signify to us as citizens. It's like maybe like in terms of the privacy stuff that is gonna be deteriorate a little bit further, is almost like a second step after 9/11. It's like you start with 9/11 and you lose a lot of stuff. It gets a little bit more of like a surveillance state. But I think with this one now, it's gonna even increase on that front. But I don't know. I hope I'm wrong. But I don't trust government in general. It's like I'm not partisan. I don't trust any of the parties, and I get shit like from everybody when I'm talking about politics, because I just don't trust their religion. I don't trust their religion, man. Yeah. So if you're in that situation, it's like you kind of find enemies in both sides, which sucks.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can talk about it, but a bunch of people at work wanted me to ask you, what's up with the drama with all the Brazilian gang?
The Brazilian gang?
Yes.
Oh man! If I say in here, someone's gonna buy the class, and then they're gonna be like, "Oh man, he's talking shit." but the thing is, man, I'm not gonna mention any names, but it's like some people, they became too famous too fast, I guess. And then they start feeling that some people are going after them. And then what happened is that I post, like, I'm a shit poster, right? Like, if you look at my Facebook, I thought,
yeah, I've noticed.
Yeah. I'm a shit post. I post lots of memes, and I actually poke fun of some behaviors in this industry. And I was like, especially the prima donnas and all this shit. And then I at some point I posted something on my Instagram, I think. And the guy actually didn't like what I posted, and just kind of like he stopped following me. He used to to comment on my stuff all the time, so he stopped following me. And then I was like, oh, fine. So one time I decided to check, and then instead of like just unfollowing me, he unfollowed me, and then he removed me from his following list. I was like, oh, that's kind of childish, right? And I was like, okay, that's fine. I mean, his choice. So I didn't say anything. He kept moving. And then a couple of months ago, I posted something. And in the text, I posted something like mentioning that everybody nowadays is how you call, like, a art director. Everybody considers themselves an art director. I have like so many friends who are modelers, right? And then all of a sudden they call themselves like art directors. like what's up with that? And the thing is, like, the dude is an art director, but he's a legit art director. He works for a big company as an art director. But for some reason, man, that was the trigger. With that post, he totally blocked me from Instagram.
I see.
Yeah, he blocked me like straight away from Instagram because of that. He thought like it was absolute about him. It's like I was really going after him. And then I was like, oh, okay. So I posted on my Facebook making fun of the whole situation. Say like, oh man, check this out. I made this guy's shit list. And then people started like laughing with me and everything. And then some of the people like close to the guy start like actually forwarding the stuff back to him, because he blocked me so he could not see my shit. So people are forwarding like all the shit posting I was doing, making fun of the whole situation. So that's basically the state of it, you know. It's just like, to me as an older dude, I kind of like, you know, it's like at some point I make fun of the situation even further if something like that happens. But to these guys, man, they're such like professionals, or at least like they want to be like seen as the super professional guys out there. And then anything that rubs them slightly differently, oh, those guys don't tolerate that, man. They just like, they totally eliminate you from their lives.
Thanks for the explanation.
Yeah. But I tell you, man, like those guys have something to lose, you know. It's like I tell people all the time, if someone burns all my bridges at this point, you know, it's like I'm happy with what I accomplished. I'm kind of like thinking about getting out of this industry for a while, you know. So I'm kind of like, you know, I always make fun of stuff, you know, that's who I am. But the thing is, like, people should have a little bit of a thicker skin, I suppose, you know. It's like, instead of like thinking that everything is targeted to them. Now, if you put yourself in those groups that I make fun of it, like, kind of you deserve it, you know, because like, I mean, it's like huge egos, man. Like, Jesus Christ.
It's the trendsetters, right? They just hop on the bandwagon to like accommodate the crowd, so they get the most followers and the most likes.
Yes.
I know exactly what you're talking about. By the way.
and they those dudes, they actually go and they pay for like fake followers. Their services, you know, just to build like their.
Oh, is that a thing?
Yeah. You basically, like, you can pay for like fake followers. Basically, like, you get like let's say like you pay a couple of bucks like for 5,000 new followers. So there's like services like that on the internet, and all of a sudden it can become like a celebrity, right? And those guys, they know how to play the game, because the more you get famous with Instagram and everything, the more you start like getting attention like from sponsors and things like that. There are people who actually make a living out of just like posting stuff on Instagram, especially those hot models, you know. So
actually, my brother is a Instagram model.
Nice.
So he tried pushing some of my. I actually opened my Instagram and started pushing one of my models.
There you go.
That was pretty funny.
Yeah, but those guys, they became like really professional self-promoters like that. And I always think about, like, you know, it's like, if my art's not enough to do that for me, I don't want to be part of that, you know. So I like just like producing my art and not curbing, you know, it's like to any trend or anything like that. From time to time, I do like a little, you know, fan art if I'm inspired by something. But I know some of those dudes, they only do fan art because they know that they're where the followers are. You know, it's like, you're gonna do, like, for example, like, you get a big company like Microsoft, Nintendo, you know, and you start doing just characters from those companies. And then every time you post a character, you tag the company, you know. And at some point, the company sees them and start like reposting, and then all of a sudden you have like a zillion followers, you know. But it's basically like playing the game. And I was like, I'm more interested in doing whatever I want to do, you know, and just whatever number I have in there, it's fine with me.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Actually, I was even surprised at how these kind of things happen, because so many times I work hard and I don't see the result. I thought, what happened? Oh, man. So today I come to know that.
Oh, yeah. There are people playing the game, man. People like paying for followers and doing it's like, if you want to get a lot of followers, I think the best thing is to do pop art, you know. I see people doing, like, especially like cartoon pop art and stuff like that. Every time there's a new movie, you go ahead and do like the character as a cartoon version. And then you post, you know, it's like, and you tag a bunch of people and you tag the studio, and eventually someone reposts it, you know. And sometimes it just takes one repost from a big company or a big profile page, like on Instagram, for you to get like thousands of followers, you know. When I did the Rick Baker's portrait, the intention was to actually pay homage to the guy because one of my idols. But then he was kind enough to actually repost right at the beginning. And that brought me like probably like 5,000 followers straight away, you know. It's like, whoa, that's kind of interesting. And it wasn't the intention, you know, but it definitely, I know how those guys are playing the game because I know how it works, you know.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to one of my buddies at work about this the other day, and you know, like I start hearing myself. I almost sound bitter, but it's like you could tell though that some of these people are just producing work just to get attention, and it's kind of frustrating because, like, you know, some of this work is amazing. It's great. It's fantastic, but when you start seeing like, oh, you don't actually like this person, you're just doing it because it's like a trend, right? And it's like
exactly.
Every other post, it's like this trend like pop singers, or it's fantastic work, but it's kind of vain, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned before, I don't follow like I'm not going to say none of them. Some celebrities I might be following, but probably like directors or someone like that, or maybe like some celebrity artists instead of like an actor. But I try to avoid like following a bunch of actors. You know, it's like it just like brings a different vibe to my timeline. You know, it's like I want to see like inspirational art instead of like just seeing like a lot of you know, like pop stuff. I don't watch TV, for example. I'm not saying that because like, oh, you want to be the different one, you know. It's just like I don't enjoy it, you know. I kind of like I work for movies, and I, you know, rarely watch the movies I work for. I kind of like I watch the movies if it's a good movie, you know, and or if it has like some mind blowing visual effects or something. But other than that, I just like, you know, just chill, like, you know, I have a lot of stuff going on with like fixing stuff around the house. I do the own like, you know, carpentry and stuff. I built some furniture for our house, like deck, you know. It's like installed the floor the other, you know, 2 months ago. Installed the floor downstairs, and you know, trying to do stuff and feel useful, and then and it ends up like it eats a lot of my time. So if I have time to relax, I'm probably thinking about what's the next project, you know, what I'm gonna be, you know, being busy with. But I mean, like, dude, I'm not trying to judge those guys, you know, like, I think they are doing the right thing for what they want to achieve, you know. It's like, if you have like a dream of becoming like an internet celebrity, you know, someone who is going to be like, you know, going to have 1 million followers in there, and that comes with a cost, but you don't care about the cost, you know. It's like, you just do it anyway. So that's up to those guys, you know. It's like, it's totally fine with me. I mean, it's not gonna, it's just shitty that those guys, they kind of like you know, they become those little guys that cannot tolerate, you know, it's like opinions from other people, and then all of a sudden if you say something that they don't like, they just completely eliminate you, you know. But yeah, it's weird. But anyway,
I was gonna say earlier that I think that one of the reasons that artists in general take classes and things like this is because we miss like other people's opinions.
Oh, interesting.
You're not like whatever, and if you don't have 1 million Instagram followers, you know, you don't get 1,000 opinions about what, you know.
Yeah.
You need like real opinions back.
Even I put my all the time creating art. What I understand from me.
Yeah.
I don't go for creating celebrities and all those things. So even sometime before I started learning about human anatomy, and I created one post called Bodies in Motions.
Oh, cool.
So I created like that, and I got printer for that also. I thought, okay, some of that I might print. So even I have one small print. So this was designed by me again some time ago.
Oh, that's cool, man. Nice. Oh, is that a 3D print?
Yes.
Nice, dude. Is that a Hulk?
Yeah.
Nice.
But it has a mustache and all.
Oh, he has a mustache. It's like a Bollywood Hulk.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I put most of the time creating art. That's why my family sometimes asks, you put a lot of effort, but we don't see any result. I said, maybe the content I create not for people what they're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of people, you know, it's like they do their own thing, and then some people don't see the value straight away. For example, like I can use an example of myself. Like when I was learning all this stuff, my now ex-wife, you know, it was like back in the day, I was married in Brazil. She didn't see a lot of value, you know. It was like on me, like staying up late, like almost every night to learn this stuff, you know. And then here I am, like years later, you know, it's like doing this for a living, you know, and then teaching this as well, and just having fun with it, you know. It's like still enjoying it a lot. And yeah, man, it's like some people like we fall in love with different things, you know. And then I remember like falling in love with one of my first computers when I bought it when I was like probably 16 or 17 years old. I was telling my wife the other day, I remember being 16 years old and missing class in the morning, for example, like failing my class in the morning because I was awake until like 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning. And I was like, and I was 16. now I'm almost 50 and I do exactly the same thing. It's part of my pattern, you know. And then obviously if it's affecting my health, I'm gonna have to do some adjustments. And sometimes I have to actually abandon things and just like sleep for days, you know. But it's the kind of stuff that it's the time that I like working. Is quiet in the house, you know, especially with the family. And yeah, it's what drives us as artists. So we are a weird type of people, but at the same time, everybody's weird out there, man. We are not that special. Everybody has a different thing going on.
I have to say the one thing that really impressed me the most about this course is the fact that like I've been like a little bit jaded in the industry and like now really wanting to do my own projects for a while. But just like going through this process just like reinvigorated a lot of my passion, and I'm
That's
I'm
awesome,
super
man.
thankful.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, because it did the same for me, you know. Yeah, it's the same thing. Like every time I start a new model, you know, it's like I never know where the model is gonna go, so it's always like this little challenge. And it's cool to see, for example, like what you guys are gonna come up with as well. You know, it's like every month we have like some very cool work coming up, and inspires me to get better as well. You know, so it's very nice, man. I like the experience a lot. Some people just think about like the you know the value, right? Like in terms of financial value, you know, it's like, is this worth it or not? You know, because it's hard to tell because if you never did it. But I think it, you know, it's like in terms of the amount of content and everything, it's a very, very fair price, especially considering you're getting like 4 classes for the price of 1. But you know, I try to do my best to make sure that the students are actually learning stuff instead of like just like I met lots of con men in this industry, you know, like teaching classes, and the guys really don't give away the information. And then and there's lots of also like those evangelists, right? Like there's some like almost like some messiahs out there of the CG world, and they want to tell you how to, you know, it's like how to make millions of dollars. They became like teaching how to become an influencer. I was like, what the fuck is that, man? Teaching how to become an influencer. So yeah, it's like lots of con mans in there, but I'm trying to do honestly and just like make sure that my students are learning something and enjoying the class, you know. But I'm too grumpy today, man. But you guys got me to that. I'm gonna have to edit out. The thing is, like, I never add those videos, so this is probably gonna be all in there with my rants and everything.
It's my fault.
There you go. I'm gonna blame you. But anyway, while I'm talking here, I'm constantly sculpting. So you see, like, I made some progress in there. And then basically what I'm doing here at this point is just like refining those forms, right? Like going higher in resolution and then just starting to add more sharpness to those lines. And then from time to time, breaking them up as well. So I'm gonna start adding more and more complexity in between them. So this little guy here, for example, I'm gonna have to actually dig a little bit sharper like that. Oh, smooth is too strong again. 5. Yeah, this smooth strong, you have to be careful because it really gets very, very strong. So let's just cut it like that. And I'm starting to actually add those little pillows here on her lips. She has like some interesting ones kind of going up and down. So I'm gonna carve something like that and then just like smooth it out. Each one of those parts, we're gonna have to actually incorporate more and more detail. At this point here, it looks a little funny. Not very different from what I'm seeing in the reference, but still looks a little repetitive. So I'm gonna try to maybe like smooth out some areas here. Let's see. Just get rid of some of that at the lowest resolution, right? So at least we just make a little bit softer in there, and then I'm gonna carve them again. Let's go back up. Okay, and then I'm gonna start actually incorporating some larger and longer lines in here. So let's go to the carve and then switch to sub. And then let's just carve some longer ones, connecting some of those little dots. Try to split some of them. So here, gonna split this a little bit like that. They have to look like they're part of the kind of like a hierarchy, right? So we're gonna have like the larger forms breaking up into smaller and smaller ones, and then make sure that you have those lines following a certain direction. For example, if we define the direction as being this way, so normally all the micro wrinkles forming are going to follow that same direction, and then obviously with some slight changes in direction just to prevent like the parallel kind of lines in there. But then as we changed angles, we're going to be able to see more and more of them. So in this point here, I'm going to just like add some more of those little guys, and then going to start blending from the top. And then right around here, we're going to do the same thing I was mentioning before, kind of like start create some different lines going outwards. What you get as well, for example, like especially with older people, you normally see right around here, imagine that this is cartilage, right? Like you have like the bone underneath, and then you have the cartilage covering the whole thing. And then you have a pressure in here between this muzzle and then whatever is the hard surface underneath in there. So right around here, sometimes you get like a wrinkle that starts around here. And basically like, imagine like this being like a soft wave hitting those rocks in here, right? And you're gonna get this basically like this little pillow right here. And then, especially like when you're older, most likely you're gonna have like some memory of the, the movement. So around there, now we have those little wrinkles. Now I can go to the highest level and just like refine them a little bit. Make a little bit sharper. And just like try to break them up from time to time, kind of like changing direction a little bit. Try to break them up like by, connecting some of those little guys and believing that, always trying to imagine what you're sculpting, for example, like if you're just copying the form itself, it's one thing, right? Like you're just trying to reproduce what you're seeing there. But if you try to understand as a physical thing, for example, like if I'm sculpting this, I have to imagine I'm sculpting skin, or at least like a very soft clay, right? And that way I can actually imagine like what's the gravity doing, it's like what's causing this whole area to sag around here. And then if I imagine this as being like a bigger form pressing against this form, I understand that I'm gonna get some wrinkles happening there. There's a little echo of that. There's like ripples of form. And then, so every time I'm sculpting something, I'm trying to imagine that as a physical object. What's happening here? How is this gonna behave when I start rendering it, right? Like I wanna make sure that I have enough breakup in directions for the specular actually hit those areas, and then, start like getting more diffuse by, finding all those areas of breakups. So it's very important. And then when you get around here, same principle. I mean, like if I have a harder surface, I'm probably gonna get a little bit more of maybe like some slight more wrinkles around it. And then I can get into the nose stuff as well. So I'm just gonna bake a few in here. And then we're gonna get to the nose stuff. Let's talk about those pores in the nose. There is one brush that I made in here. Let's see if I can find. I never find stuff because I have so many. I have to do some cleanup, and I never do. Let's see. I have the skin bump stuff, and I have the stubble, veins, single pore, elastic thin layer. Let's see. Skin there, pimple. So I have this pimple 3, I believe. No, not this one. Let's try pimple 2. Obviously, it's going to be pimple 1. Yes. Okay. So this one here, what it does is this. If I sculpt by itself, it's going to look weird, okay? By itself, it only looks like this. Looks a little funny. But when you have in the context of having some wrinkles already in place, it actually works very nicely. So this is basically the alpha 39, but I actually tweaked the curve to look like this. So this is the tip, and that's like the bulge that goes around it, right? So kind of like you have the tip in there. So you kind of like, you get like a little depression and then the thing popping out. If you use with a smaller intensity, something like, let's try like 15 around here. And if I have, for example, something like a pore like that, I can add like some, little pimples inside of those pores. So for this area of the nose, I can actually do that kind of stuff. I can start by using, some trick here with going to a subdivision level that's a little bit lower than this. Maybe around, let's see, this is 500, maybe at 2000 polys. So I'm gonna go for my pore first, like the single pore. right here. And then I'm gonna try to keep this asymmetrical, even though they are separated in there. I'm gonna try to keep asymmetrical. I'm gonna start doing something like this. So you have the pores with a certain distance between them here. So when I get around here, I'm gonna start actually increasing the distance. So I'm gonna make some of them a little bit closer to that distance that we have in there. Something like that. But then as I get a little bit further, I'm gonna start spreading things out a little bit more. Try to imagine like what happens with the UVs when you apply the UVs and you unwrap things in a face, right? You're normally gonna get like more stretch around the nose. You're gonna get like some of, if you have like a grid applied or numbers, the number is gonna look a little bit bigger around the nose unless you cut it off and you unfold the nose in itself. But if the nose is attached to the face, you're gonna get like those bigger numbers and UV spaces in here. So that's basically, you know, what the computer is trying to do, imagining that this form here is actually bulging out. Everything is a little bit stretched out. So that's basically what we were trying to do here. Basically, like the pores go from something that are a little closer to something a little bit more stretched out, you know. And then obviously some of them we're gonna start eliminating completely. We can do some smoothing and everything. But that's basically how we're gonna start like the blending here. So between this and this, gonna have less and less density. And then when we get to something around the nose in here, let's try to use maybe lower intensity, maybe 33, even lower than that. And I'm gonna try to do some of those little pores right around here, like very kind of delicate, you know. A common mistake that I see a lot is, for example, like people get something like, let's see, skin color, let's see, multi-pores. Let's see one I can use for that. Poly paint, pore depth, single pore, stubble. Maybe this one could work. Let's try that. Let's try this one. So for example, like for nose, people use something like something very, you know, it's like a lot of it in the same spot like that. And sometimes like this doesn't help with the specular, you know. Sometimes the specular gets too diffuse. You're gonna find people with noses like that, like older people. But in general, if you keep like the forms a little bit more clear in between and you have just the pores in there, so you get a little bit more shiny tip of the nose, you know. It's like instead of like getting everything bumpy, obviously you're gonna be building some of that a little bit more as well. But for the most part, we're gonna just like keep them a little bit more separated. And then slowly gonna build up some forms in between them, but without breaking up too deep, you know. We don't wanna create like a super noisy area. We wanna make sure that the specular is gonna catch it pretty good in there. And like I said before, this is like subdivision level 2 of my HD. So I can just add them in there. And then when you go to the highest level, we should have them a little bit softer. So let's incorporate some in here. I can start actually building towards those other guys I have. So around here, a little bit more dense. And then some of them I can just completely eliminate. Some of them I can make deeper, right? But eventually, when you get like to an area like this, where the cartilage is, you're probably not gonna get a lot of them. So you can start like spreading it out a little bit again. And then back around here. And then one thing that you mentioned before was about the depth, right? Like how to get the depth of some of them a little bit deeper and add more variation. So that's gonna be the next step. We're gonna be including all this stuff. But there's one brush in here. Let me see if I can find it. Pimple, let's see, pore depth, this one here. So this pore depth, you see what it is basically like the elastic brush that we mentioned before a couple of times, and then the elastic brush combined with the stroke, the drag rectangle, and then the alpha. It can be anything. I mean, like it can be. I think I'm using like a 35 or 36, something like that. And then my focal shift is still at 0, so I didn't change it. Let's see if my alpha I change it. Yeah, I made a little bit more into a point like that. Everything else is default. So because I'm using the elastic with drag rectangle, what happens is that now I can actually go and make some of those pores a little deeper without destroying the forms, right? Because it's elastic. So I can go, for example, like I'm gonna make sure I'm asymmetrical, because at this point, oops, I actually created one by accident in there. If I show you guys what's doing around here, which is a clear spot, it's basically creating that kind of effect. So basically, like, there's a very broad fall off in there, and a sharp little point in the middle. So if I get something like a pore like those ones in here, which probably gonna get a couple of them with more depth. So I'm gonna pick one like this one around here. You see, if I keep pulling it and make it bigger and bigger, so I can just like really go for the size that I want to create, like, make it a little bit more natural, and then pick a couple of them. Try not to make like the distance between them too equal, right? Like you kind of like pick some of them closer to each other in a little cluster, and then someone more spread out. And that way, eventually you start adding more variation to the whole thing, It's gonna be proportional to the amount of work, obviously, you wanna put to create this, this effect, Since we are doing a lot of stuff by hand in here, all of this stuff is gonna be dependent on the amount of effort you're putting in the model, It's the kind of stuff like I cannot take responsibility, and I have to take responsibility for my own model, because if I'm lazy, it's gonna show, It's gonna show that everything looks a little bit repetitive. But if you put enough work, we should be able to, with this type of pass, combined with the pimples later, it's like scars, micro wrinkles, things like that. Everything should work and look more natural. At this point here, I'm just adding depth, but they're still very round, right? Like it's like everything is very round. It looks very like orange peel still, although although it looks a little bit more natural with some more depth in some areas. I added one by mistake in there. Look, there's a little pimple in there. It works. That's basically what I'm going to be doing later anyway. But around here, just going to pick some of them and very quickly just add some. See, just picking like some random ones in here, and then trying to keep like not a constant distance, like something that makes sense, but without being like the perfect space. Like, remember the triangles I mentioned, like with the pores, right? Like stay away from like this patterns. Make sure everything is a little bit more random. So this is like a little pass you can do, it's like eventually you're gonna be covering the entire face with something like this. But so this is another brush that you guys can try. And then I have something like the where is it? The skin random. That one that we are using for the direction, right? Like for all those areas. We can use for an area like the nose, for example. I can use like a low intensity just to break up this perfect, smooth surface. So let me just like turn off the symmetry. And if I start doing like in circles in here again, something like that. Let's try a little bit lower than that. Let's try like little circles like this. Just to add a little bit of this leathery kind of surface to it. And this kind of stuff, like you can use like almost everywhere, anywhere. For example, like in the eye bags, I use a lot of those guys, especially like the top eyelids, things like that. And just like I start like playing with low intensity like this, and then slowly like building up more intensity until I get like a nicer result. But that's the kind of stuff that fills up like the gaps in between the stuff, It's like if you have pores and everything, it really helps to bring up things. But then obviously all this stuff has to be blended perfectly. You're gonna add a ton of detail to make this blend work much better than it is right now. So I'm gonna turn on my symmetry. I'm just gonna add both sides here at this point. Here in the bags, I can start blocking, for example, like following the direction of the bagging here. So for example, like just building some of them very softly like this, just so I have an idea about what the direction I have to go. Something like that. And then when I come around here, those probably gonna start coming from top down. So you create a little bit of a cross between them like that. It's just like very faint, so I can actually feel the surface in there. And then eventually I'm gonna come with my curving here in areas like that we need more blend, like this one. And we're gonna do the same thing we are doing around the mouth in there. So for example, I'm gonna define, I'm gonna come like with a little longer line like this and start like digging into the pores themselves. Intensity is a little high here. Let's try 11. Something like that, like very, you know, slowly building up. Again, like try to keep things not too parallel, just like building up like that. And then from time to time, you can pick one and come like from, you know, a higher place, and then like start like blending to the lower spots in here. And then obviously trying to keep like some of them more diagonal, like that. So eventually this whole area here, this is going to be building into more and more wrinkles until the pores are completely, you know, ignored in this area. So the pores is going to be visible all the way until here. And that from that point on, everything else is going to be basically like a very stretchy skin. Now with her skin here, what's interesting is that she has those lines coming from different directions because of like, it's very, very thin skin. It's not that elastic because older people, right? But you see like those ones are coming that direction. So you're gonna have a cross section here. Those ones are coming from here, and then those are coming that direction, right? Same around here. So you see those ones going that direction, and then those ones coming this direction. So you're gonna have some hero ones, some bigger wrinkles, and then some smaller ones. So let's do some work on that, for example. I'm gonna be exploring a little bit of everything today. And then tomorrow we're probably gonna be just refining this stuff. So it's much more hands-on stuff. But for today, let's just try to, you know, work on all those little techniques in there. So let's try, for example, around here. I'm probably gonna have to resculpt this lumpy mess in here a little bit, but just for the purpose here, I'm gonna sculpt some of those lines. So I'm gonna go with a lower intensity, maybe like 9. I'm gonna start blocking some of them. So I'm gonna come from here, even lower than this, maybe like 5. I'm gonna go a little bit bigger. Softer. So from here, and then from here, gonna go a little bit more towards here. And those are just like placeholders, right? Like we still have to build up some forms in there to make sure that things look organic. But for now, we need to mark at least like their direction. And you're gonna notice that I don't undo a lot. And the reason for it is just because I have fun with it, you know, it's like, it's just, I don't think things need to be perfectly placed, just like in the reference. But they have to feel like the quality of the skin in the reference looks like, you know. Things have to look like they're believable. Not necessarily realistic, but believable, you know. You need to believe that this would be possible to happen in an actual person. So she has those lines that they go and change direction around here. So I'm gonna build one around here, very, very faint. Another one around here. And all of those ones, I'm going to start getting a little bit more intensity in them very soon. But first I have to just block some of them. Those ones actually sag a little bit around here. And then I'm going to build up. There is one in her face. I'm going to just smooth out that whole area here because I don't like this lump. I'm just going to build up this a little bit more, and then let's just incorporate some more form in here. Lumpy stuff is hard, you know, it's like because of, if you see from a distance, you know, things really start bothering me, like when I see lumpy models, like from a distance. So it's always nice to kind of feel like there is a structure underneath, you know, it's like there's a lot of stuff going on in here. She has like her bone structure that's kind of buried in here, right? Because she's smiling, so she has all this layers of fat in here, and you know you're not going to see that much. But even underneath this whole area here, there's like areas of fat and you know, like I said before, like this whole area of the eyelids get a little bit more puffy with older people until they get like very round. The younger people, sometimes you see like a very well-defined sharp edge in there, which like in her case I don't see that much. It's more like a round kind of thing. It kind of loses the form a little bit. So just gonna make sure that the eyelid looks a little bit more, a little fatter underneath in here. Kind of like even underneath here, just build a little bit more. And then around here, let's just carve this inner part a little bit. Everything becomes a little subtle. And then obviously, if it's something that really needs like major changes, I can go to a lower level and then really, you know, go to town with that stuff. But at this point here, I'm actually searching for this softness that's in the secondary forms. And then if it's looking a little lumpy in there, you can just go back in resolution a few times and then just like make sure you smooth it out enough just to make sure that things are coherent again. And then back to it. There's one pass that we're gonna do at some point, which is like this connection here between the eyelid and the eyeball itself. I normally create a little membrane in there. I sculpt like a little higher thing that gets like very thin. It's all built into displacement, and it creates a little bit of a better blend combined with the tear line in there. We're going to be adding as well as a separate object. Those two together, they kind of help to do a nice little blend, you know, between those areas. So all those things in the next like couple of weeks, we still have plenty of time. We're going to be building more and more stuff into something more complex, you know, eventually. So let's do back here. Let's go back to some wrinkles. Let's carve some of them around here. So those ones I can go a little bit deeper. So let's try maybe like 8. And I'm going to start like marking some of the main ones. So her carancula area here, it's not very well defined. It's very lumpy. Just going to build some of that first before I can go further. So just going to build, let's see, if I see some of her forms, they start like from the inside of the eye here, and they build up towards this area and gets a little thinner around here. In a very subtle way. And then around here, it goes a little lower, and then it kind of ends in there. So we're going to do this just to define a little bit more like that. Eventually, you know, it's like all those forms we're going to be refining and refining. Even here, I can see there's a little bit of a depth in here. So there's a little membrane in there too. A little higher. And then now, let's go to our wrinkles. Turn up the symmetry, and then let's carve some of them around here. So I'm going to start with, oops, I'm actually reversing my carve. So let's do this one, and then use my Alt. What? I changed it again. Alt. And then I'm going to carve some of them going this way, create that little bunch in here, and then some bigger one around. Let's see, she has one around here. And then again, try to cut it from time to time and just like, instead of like going in a single line. And then the other one she has kind of goes all the way from here, goes across. And then this one's going to become deeper and deeper. Goes across here, and then all the way around here. And that one becomes a deep one around there. So this one I can actually eliminate later. Or maybe, I think let me see. Let me just redo this one for a second. Sometimes I don't do this stuff. So let's see, if I get this point here to there, so I'm just going to connect this. So it goes a little bit more towards that direction. And this one becomes a secondary one. So this one goes over right here. So now let's just reinforce this. So I'm going to go a couple of subdivision levels lower, something like that, and increase my intensity a little bit. Let's dig this one a little deeper. Maybe too much. Let's see, lower intensity. I'm gonna bring this one to a deeper line that breaks up towards this direction right here. He actually has a little cut in here that's gonna change direction as well, as she's starting to build some of those forms coming from there as well. And so this one here breaks up around there. Let's make a little deeper. Make sure that they smooth it out a little bit so it doesn't get too weird. carve it again. Smooth again. And carve again. So this one here going to be making a little bit longer later. Maybe I got a little bit too deep, so let's just build up a little bit again down there. So let's go back to the higher level. So it's nice and smooth in there. So let's see, let's get some sharp line here. And I'm gonna reinforce this guy here with a sharper line. Higher intensity, so let's go over this one. And then once I have like some of those key lines established, I can go to town like imagining what's around them, you know, it's like basically like as long as I follow the direction and the, you know, I understand the structure in there, a lot of this stuff I can just go and start like really imagining, you know. So those little guys, for example, just like start building some of them towards that. And then let's bring some of those guys now and build some volume. You see, like I have them established in here, but they're still very much like I did a sketch. So let's go maybe like 1 or 2 subdivision levels lower than that. Get our clay built up with a little round alpha in there. And let's build up in between here. So for example, these guys. Make sure that things are nice and organic and starting to blend with those surrounding areas. If it's too much, I can just remove some of them later. Really trying to interpret the, you know, as a kind of like a soft kind of skin in there. And I go back and forth. Sometimes I sculpt stuff that looks a little bit too strong, you know, and then I go back and try to smooth it out again. Let's go like a couple of subdivision levels lower, just smooth it out a little bit. Whatever I did too much in there. Then go back a couple of levels. Incorporate some more stuff. And then when we get to those areas here, like the bag itself, we're gonna have like lines coming from different directions. So you're gonna have like those lines coming from the outside, something like that. And build a couple of them like that. And then some coming from the inside here. So this one I'm gonna just reinforce, maybe with a little bit sharper point. Let's see, higher intensity and sharper. And then from time to time, just like really cutting over it. And then once you have those guys established, like even around here, I can start actually adding some direction in there as well. Let's go around here. Since she's squinting a little bit, she's probably gonna have some of those guys moving in a different direction here. And then around here, those are all kind of going towards those lines in her nose. Which we're gonna have to actually use some crisscrossing here as well. So they don't look too, you know, parallel to each other as usual. So, you know, it's just crossing things a little bit. Around here, let's do some more of that. And slowly you're gonna start building up this whole area of the eye bagging here. And from time to time, you're gonna pick like one of those lines and you're gonna pick like, okay, this is the little hero in there. So we're gonna make it a little deeper, a little bit more defined. So for example, around here, if I get like this one, for example, I can go and use this one as one of the main ones. So basically like this is the one that's gonna catch most of the highlight of the specular. And then the other ones are gonna be just like reinforcing that direction, right? Like it's almost like the eye goes with it. But those large ones, the ones that actually the specular is really going to catch in there. And then, so when I get to this area here, one thing that I do, obviously this stuff here, those wrinkles, going to be adding more and more of them. And then from time to time, picking some of them and making more here, like I said before. Like, for example, around here, I'm probably going to have another one that goes a little bit deeper. And then it goes more towards this direction here. It starts like blending with the other direction. It all depends on the facial expression you have baked in there. In this case here with the squint, there's a lot going on with her very, very frail skin that's changing a lot of direction in there. But around this area here is normally where I add like more bumps and stuff, like you saw in my own eye, right? I have this lots of little bumps in there. So for that, you can use like a combination of things. Like, let's see, like I have this pimple 3, that's the one I show you like for the nose, and this pimple 2. Let's see what this one does. This one is a little bit big, a little bit too deep. But if I reduce the depth of it, let's try. It's from like 12. Let's see. It's very subtle, right? Let's try a little bit bigger than that. Yeah, that's a little pimple in there. So for this area, I can add something like this. You know, it's like it's a simple alpha. You can use like anything. I mean, this focal shift I'm bringing to -35. So it actually brings like the sides a little bit sharper, right? And then basically like what I'm doing here, just like adding some of those pimples. I can even go like to a lower res if I want, just to make sure it's not interfering with anything. Or I can, you know, include like some more. I noticed that she has a big pimple in there, or like at least like a mole or something. So this kind of stuff can help with achieving a little bit more realism as well. You know, in areas like right at the eyelid in here, close to the tear line. Sometimes you're gonna get like some ones around this, and even like some ingrown little hairs around. So you can actually add some of them around there. If you want to do, for example, something with absolute precision, you can simulate, for example, by later on exporting the XGen. So for example, instead of doing what I'm doing here, creating those pimples, you can just export the XGen as geometry. You can transfer your XGen into geometry, and then you can import the geometry here in ZBrush, use that as a separate subtool, and just sculpt the little pimples right against them. But that's the kind of stuff that only works when you have like the eyelashes, for example, absolutely in the perfect spot, right? It's not something you're gonna have to, you can tweak all the time. You need to wait until you have something that looks really cool, and then you can do that, you know. Same you can do with the hair, for example. I mentioned this in my previous class, that I did this experiment at some point with my Dick Smith portrait, which was basically like creating an ambient occlusion pass that basically helped me to bake all the position of all the hair in the head into a map with ambient occlusion. So each one of the follicles of the hair had like a correspondent like black dot in the skin. And what's cool about that is that if you mix that map with subsurface scattering, you can simulate that ingrown hair kind of thing that I was showing the other day, you know, kind of like looks a little bit more gray, bluish underneath the skin. You can try to simulate a little bit like that, you know. The way it works is basically like in Maya, you can render stuff into to an ambient occlusion pass in Arnold. For example, if I show you guys here, let's say like you have your XGen all over the place. So you have your XGen in there. Oh, I'm rendering, by the way, in the background. So if you have XGen already placed in here, so all the hair is in place, and you want to create a map that's a map for your model in here that has a little black dot for each one of the hair follicles in the entire head. So you can do that by selecting and making visible the head and the follicles you want to do that with. And then you're going to go, for example, to Arnold, and you can say, let's see if I remember. Let's see if I remember. Utilities, and then convert shaders to Arnold. Oh, render selection to texture, right? So basically, if you do that, then you can actually do this. You can go to your shader network. This is like just like out of curiosity, something for you guys to think about if you want to do it. It's overkill in my opinion, but you know, if it's something you're going to do like for close-ups, you can use that. So for example, if you go to Arnold, the first thing you're going to notice here, you have a bunch of shaders. If you select just shader itself, there's the ambient occlusion shader here, right? So if you click, for example, like if you have your model selected and your XGen just for the hair selected, you can actually assign ambient occlusion render or shader for the entire thing. So that means when you render anything, it's going to render with the ambient occlusion shader. Obviously, the shader has a bunch of different parameters in here. So it's starting with like the spread, the fall off, and all this stuff, the near clip and far clip. It's the kind of stuff you're going to have to tweak to make sure that each one of the follicles only creates a tiny little bit of spread around it. Instead of like a large fall off, it has to be a very short one to create just that little, correspondent point right there. And the other thing I do normally, obviously, I can talk about this in more detail when we start doing the hair itself. But when I go for something like this, I go to each one of those descriptions of the hair, and I make sure that the root is a little bit smaller than usual. Basically, like it creates a little bit of a cone in the follicle. So when I render the ambient occlusion, it gets a very, very nice little black dot right around that little spot that just spreads out. So once you have, like, for example, like the hair and the head, like with the ambient occlusion pass, shader pass, you just go to Arnold and you say render to texture, render selection to texture, select everything that's involved. And you can give like the naming here, the resolution you want to go. And then once this finishes, it basically bakes all the texture into the model itself. You can do this for lighting as well. You can use this stuff like for pre-lighting a scene, for example, like for games or whatever. Basically, like all the lights that are in the environment are going to be baked into this, right? So the reason why you're using ambient occlusion is because it bypasses the all the lights and everything and just creates the shader itself. If that doesn't work, you can now always create like a dome light and just assign like a white color to it, and you can render with that. So just make sure you don't have any shadows themselves. It's like something more global. And that way you can actually produce a nice little map that's all white with like tiny little dots that correspond to every single follicle. You can do that for example, stubble. You can basically create the stubble, and then you can bake that into the map. And then later on, you can transfer that over and mix it with the map, the final map, or with the shader. And then you get like the ingrown hair and all this stuff, So it's like a little trick in there you can try. One thing I forgot to mention here is a technical thing about ZBrush, which is this. Check this out. Right now I have 32 million polygons here, right? And then you realize that I didn't save this model at all so far. So I'm gonna save it now. And you're gonna notice something here. So first, if you save it with undo history at this point here, this work is gonna be gigantic, right? Because it basically has a history from HD geometry. And that's gonna be super heavy. It's gonna be like many gigs of information. So I'm gonna save without it. And you're gonna notice the size of my file so far is being around, the more detail I added, this one was after the pores. I got like from 60,000, I went to 200,000 K, right? So 200 megabytes. So I'm gonna go to number 4, you're gonna save it. You're gonna see the size of this file. Check this out. So it's saved, took 9 seconds. Let's see the size of it. So now I have 794 megabytes, right? But check this out. I saved it while I was inside of HD mode, right? You can do that if you want to. But the best way to do it, if you can, obviously, if you're not afraid to lose anything, you just go out of HD. And now I'm gonna save it again with another name. I can even do better than this. I'm gonna go to the lowest resolution. I'm gonna save it with number 5, for example. Okay, so bear in mind that this is exactly the same model. If I go to HD here, all the detail is still the same. It's basically like everything that I had saved in that file, I'm saving again in here. So let's compare the size of the files. Look at that. The previous one I saved when I was inside of HD, 700, almost like 800 megabytes. This one I just saved 256, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind, It's like if you want to save like smaller files, you can get out of HD before you save. And then if I go back here, let's just do this. Let's just click on the model, isolate it. I'm gonna go HD again. And there it is, like all the detail is still there, So yeah, it's a nice little trick in there for you guys if you wanna save some space. Now, at this point we have like 15 minutes left, so let's do a little export of this thing. Let's export to see how this looks. Actually, let's get out of HD first, because I want to see how this detail is holding up. And sometimes it's nice to just do like a render straight away, and then see how much deeper or how much shallower you have to do with everything. Just recapping here how to export things at this point. I'm gonna go to my lowest resolution, and then I'm gonna go one subdivision level higher. So this is gonna be my second subdivision. I'm gonna export this one first as my mid-res model. It's gonna be basically a recap from yesterday. So MR, because we need to do this every time we do a new iteration. So let's do MR4. And then to the lowest now, we're gonna export this one as LR4, low resolution.
So
then,
Chris, is
yes,
that necessary to do every time?
Yeah, I would say so, because like we are trying to match all the changes we are doing here, bringing it to Maya to make sure that Maya is rendering exactly what we just did. You know,
okay.
Unless it's something like you're really not too worried about it. For example, like if you're just sculpting fine detail and you can deal with the model being slightly different. But I do this because I want to make sure that it's like everything is represented exactly how I did in ZBrush. Because if I need to do a change, I know exactly where I need to change, you know.
And for the morph target, you do that as well every time, right?
Yes. So basically,
Okay.
I'm going to do it right now. So I deleted it. So I'm going to do store switch import. I'm going to import my lower. And then now we are ready to export things. I'm going to keep the same name. So when you import an OBJ, it changes the name of the subtool. So basically, this is the name of the subtool now. So my map is going to be exported with that name. So let's do that. I'm going to do a create all maps. Everything is set from yesterday. So subdivision level 2, adaptive, blah, 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 all that stuff. Let's just create the mapping here. And then
sorry, Chris, excuse me. Is this just for displacement maps, or would this be for like a texture map too?
Texture map as well. So once you have your texture map in place, oh no, you mean like the whole morph target switch thing? Yeah, no, you don't need that for color.
It's just for the displacement, right?
Just displacement, yeah. For color, you can even turn off the switch morph target altogether.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. That's what I've been doing. I was just making sure that that was correct.
Yeah. I mean, like if you're exporting everything in a single pass, for example, here, if you had texture in place, you can export like the textures from here. And then in that case, you can keep it everything on the way it is, and it's going to work fine, you know? But,
yeah.
But I mean, like, yeah, it's not necessary.
I'm doing the textures and the displacement at the same time, but I felt like I had to do the little morph target export import thing before before I did all that. Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's a little overkill, so don't worry about it. Let's see. It's
hey, Chris.
Yes.
Sorry, have you ever tried exporting Geometry HD to a normal map?
To a normal map? That's a good question.
For video games?
A good question. I mean, like I don't have a lot of experience with that, but back in the day, it was extremely challenging to get like a normal map that actually worked with something, because you always had to flip like one channel, like green channel, whatever it is. And then, but nowadays seems like all those engines, I mean, like in Mario, I believe you can actually flip those channels, or it's like a bunch of those others, like maybe Marmoset, you can actually flip them as well. So no matter how you export, as long as it's based on the, what is that, like tangent space, right? I think that's what normally people use. Then in that case, I mean, like it's just easy, you know, you just like, it's the same settings in there, basically like it's the same stuff I just did. And then you just gotta click like in tangent space. And then instead of like flipping things in ZBrush, I would just export default and then try to flip them inside of some other application, you know?
Gotcha.
Yeah. Even like the how you call like the displacement, like the one that's based on like 3D space. What's the name of that type
Vector.
of vector displacement? Yeah. In the past, that was such a pain in the butt to do that, because you had to go, if you remember, like ZBrush had a little test scene that you had to render to figure it out what was the, oh, interesting, I lost my bar in there. Oh, there you go. 2 monitors with different resolution do that. Yeah, you had to render this little scene to actually figure out what's the softer basically like if you're rendering stuff in Maya with let's say like back in the day was Arnold, not Arnold, but Mental Ray, you have to render the scene and then compare, for example, like it was basically like a grid and had like letters like A to, I don't know, like F in one side, and then 1 to 8 or whatever number on the top. So it's kind of like a square. And then with all this little grid with little spheres in the middle. And then basically you would render straight from ZBrush to Maya. And then one of those little spheres would look correct because each one of them are going to have like a different type of combination of things. And then you would have to take note of that, it's like A7, for example, is the one that's perfect for Maya. And then you would have to take note of that and then flip the correct channels. It was a mess, but I believe things are handled better nowadays. I just don't use vector displacement, but it's something I have to go back and experiment with it. I think it can be very useful for stuff, like especially if you're deforming things. So it's something that I might try again soon. It's very powerful. I mean, so this is the lady from yesterday. I was doing some renders, and the thing that's bothering me is that I don't have like the neck resolved yet. And then it's just like, I don't know, even if I'm gonna go for something like this or completely change or make her go back to normal first and then have the face resolved first and then, later on start like messing around again. Just because I don't want to, it's like mess up with her nice sweet face too much. And I think the neck, it's like from the side, it actually works in a way. Then from the front, it's still a little funny looking. And the thing that's interesting is that I posted this lady the other day, and I tagged on Instagram the Nagaland, right? Like that those tribes in there, or that culture in that region. And one guy posted on a reply saying like, "Oh, that's my aunt." And I don't know if the guy was being serious, because it's possible. and then a couple of days passed by, and I posted this version with the big ears and then this neck, and he mentioned like, why is she deformed? And then I started thinking about, what if the guy's serious? What if he took offense? I was like, maybe it is his actual aunt, like a dear aunt, And then I started thinking like, oh, maybe I should normalize her neck at least, keep the ears, and oh man, you never know. Maybe the guy was just trolling me, but you never know. But it made me think, it's like maybe I should get her a little bit more normal.
That's super hilarious,
right? Hey, that's my aunt, dude. What you doing with her? Why you deformed her?
I'd be stoked if somebody made my aunt into an elf.
Right?
Thing.
Then turns out like, oh, she had cancer, man. She could just like, she had a lump in her neck, and now you're, bringing those memories. I was like, no, dude. So let's do the same process from yesterday, just a recap again. So if you did any changes.
I don't think so. From Nagaland, anyone will do it because they're nice people.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
We usually don't go to court and all too much. We always avoid. Because Indian police is, oh my God.
Oh, yeah. So a little recap here. Going to just do like a file import again. And the only thing to remember is always that last thing here, right? If you did one time, this is saved. If you want to make sure, you just click that and then just go edit, save settings. That's saved. So I'm going to go import, and I'm going to get my old lady medium res. So not the lowest res, the medium one, because that's the one we're going to use it for the hair later. And then it should be the last model that was imported here, right before those groups. So this one here is the newest one. So we're gonna click the newest one, control click the previous one. Then I'm gonna deform blend shape. Since I already gave a name before that was called AAA, if I do it here, basically like Maya remembers it. So I'm gonna click blend shape straight away. So there it is, AAA. And then I'm gonna just go up, so it changes things. And then now I'm gonna just bake this into, like, by deleting the history. Once you have the XGen, I would not encourage you guys to do the delete all by type history. Always delete the delete by type history, Alt-Shift-D. And then now I can delete the latest one I just imported that brought all those polygroups. So if I delete it here, the polygroups go away. So it goes straight away. So now what I need to do is basically just incorporate the displacement map. So you're just going to go to Skin, click this little arrow, File, and then let's pick the latest one, which is LR4. And it should load everything automatically because we had our rules for the ACES. So linear sRGB already recognized the 5 tiles because we already have Mari UDIM set in there. And then we should be ready to render. So the next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna actually incorporate a little bit more subdivision. Remember yesterday I mentioned I'm gonna do like 3 subdivision levels for the subdivision here for Catmull Clark. And then I said, but probably gonna incorporate, I'm gonna increase to 4 at some point. So I'm gonna do it now. It's gonna take a little bit longer to calculate, but then once it's calculated, it's gonna render just fine. So let's do like a render from here. When you subdivide more in there, I would not go higher than 5. Otherwise, you're gonna get like into trouble with your memory. Probably gonna run out of memory. But you know, 4, I would say like it's a good spot, and then 5 would be kind of like ideal in a way if you want to capture like close-up stuff like of wrinkles and pores and everything. It really deforms the surface instead of like rendering as a bump, right? Because of the auto bump. It actually renders as a nice displacement. So it really breaks the profile, which is really cool if you render like a high resolution model and you want to make sure that, you know, if you're rendering a profile, you get things like really to the form. So let's see if we get an area like this. Let's just zoom in around here and just render this area that we just did some work in. Yeah, the shader went back to something a little bit lighter here, so I hope we can see what's going on as it renders. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to, you know, maybe like change the lighting a little bit, make something a little bit sharper. Let's see what happens. Probably like a better area to see stuff is gonna be that other side, but then in that case, I basically, most of the sculpture I did today was mostly on this side, so let's see if that's gonna calculate in there. Now with 4 subdivision levels, yeah, things take longer to calculate, but then once it starts rendering, then it kind of speeds up. It has to kind of like subdivide the whole mesh like during render time. So it's almost like it divides everything and then displaces it.
Do you think you'll be able to go back to your old rendering computer after this one?
Oh man, it's gonna be hard. I mean, like you always make it work, right? I mean, like all the other classes I taught like for the past like year almost was all with the other computer, and it was just fine, you know. It's just that now that I have this one, you always feel tempted. Okay, I can add some more samples. I can subdivide one more time now, and then at the end you're rendering at the same speed, you know. Basically, you get a much faster computer, but then because you're increasing all the samples to get better results, at the end you get like basically the same speed. Yeah, I'm really loving this one, and it's very stable.
How renders at work?
What's that?
How renders at work?
Oh, at work?
Yeah.
Oh, it's all render farm, man. We don't even worry about it. Yeah, you put in the farm, and then a couple of minutes you have the renders in there. Unless it's like local renders, because my machine at work is not as fast at all as this one. So I'm starting to see some of the forms in there. And I don't know about this area here. Let me just do something. Let's just reduce again to 3 iterations, because I want to make sure that I'm rendering so I can actually evaluate and do a little faster than this. Let's get maybe around here and see what we get going. I want to make sure that that wrinkle is sculpted is deep enough. Because of the shader being so light now, I mean, like it's kind of like harder to see what's going on. But when it was a little darker, I was able to see things a little bit better. So this render here should be a little bit faster now. Let's try that. This eyeball is a mess, by the way. It's one of my previous ones, just like with bad iris adjustment in there, because she has this kind of like cataract stuff. And it looks like this, kind of almost like bluish. So we're gonna have to do, you know, try to get that. Mine are, at this point are just like kind of gray, not so blue. But eventually gonna have to try to emulate that. Shit. The two monitor with two different resolutions really mess things up, man. One is like it's a 4K monitor, and the other one's just a 1K, actually 2K, right? Like a 1920. Yeah, basically like HD. And so when I move from one to another one, it kind of like tries to snap. It's weird. Let's see. Yeah, right now it's going to be very waxy silicone kind of thing, but at least we can see some of this stuff. So that's the one I was sculpting just now. It's a little soft in there. I mean, like it's going to be heavily dependent on the amount of samples you're using, and then also the lighting and the how specular this thing is. Remember, like that in real life, the skin is very specky, right? It just breaks up the speck because it has a ton of detail in there. But for example, like you look at this old lady here. At first glance, I mean, like you look from a distance like that, it looks very opaque. It's almost like, oh man, it's not scattered, it's not specular at all. Basically, like I can get away with like using very little speck. But then if you start zooming in, everything is very specular, right? Like you have a lot of it. It's just that there's so many forms and so many little lines in there breaking up that when you go from a distance, everything becomes more diffuse. So from here, I can see still a lot of those specks like that, right? It's a lot of specularity here. It's like it has this very soft, glowy feel to the skin itself. And then all this is specular in here, but it's all broken up. So that's what we're going to try to emulate when you have like the micro bump. Yes, tomorrow we're going to be applying some micro bump. And I'm going to try to emulate that. And basically like the intention is to use a bump map combined with a mask. And then we're going to control like with that mask, you're going to control how high or how low the bump is. And with that, we can actually control how much breakup we get to the skin. Instead of like simply relying on a roughness map, we're going to use like a bump map to help to break up the specular. So basically around areas that are like softer like that and a little bit shinier, we're going to use like very low intensity for the breakup. So it's going to go very shiny. It's going to just respect whatever comes from the displacement map. But then the other areas like this, whatever we have in our micro bump map is going to show through and it's going to break up the surface a little bit more. And then at the end, you should have something similar to this, that looks a little bit rougher and then a little bit more shiny. And that we're going to do just by controlling the height of this map. So yeah, it's for the African guy I did like last January, I actually used the combination. It was a combination of this technique plus a roughness map because certain areas was just easier to control with a roughness map. So you can always use both, You can use a roughness map just for the lips, for example. Sometimes it's hard to get like this, kind of like soft specular to the lips. And then, if you do that way, you see like you have this very soft speck in here. And then you have like some sharp in there where you have some liquid. So yeah, we can always use like a combination of things, My theory is to always use like the minimum amount. See, like it's very silicone looking, but it's the beginning of it, right? And eventually we're gonna make this whole thing look a little bit more real. But my philosophy is this thing, it's like try to do push as far as you can with the minimum amount of maps you can use, If things are working with the less maps and like less complex shader networks, I say go for it. And then every time you hit a wall and it was like, okay, there's no way I can achieve that without adding another map, then you add some more complexity, And you're gonna be surprised that sometimes if you push hard enough, like in those basic maps, you can get a lot of stuff done, So I can make very realistic renders without using a ton of like super complex shader networks, As an artist, I really appreciate that kind of approach because, I can be very technical, but I'm not like a super technical guy, I was like someone who actually understands all the ins and outs and can program and all that crap. But, it's like if I can do something that's simpler on my end, the better, So yeah, it's basically what I had for today, guys. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, I mean, like we are talking all the time, but if you have anything additional, I can actually go over with you guys. For tomorrow, basically what I'm going to be doing is going to be a little bit more of the same. Probably tonight I'm going to be doing some more work because I have to work for the video to process. So probably going to be doing some more work around the eye bags, kind of similar to what I was showing you guys. eventually adding some bigger forms, building up some more of those guys around here. And then tomorrow we still have plenty of work to do everywhere. So we always have room to talk more about that stuff. I have to resolve this little pinch right there as well. It's like pretty thin and very weird. So yeah. All right, guys. I hope you have a nice one and keep cranking in there. You guys are doing great. So just remember that this weekend we have our reviews. It's going to be on Saturday. And the difference is that instead of like running at the same time that I'm doing now, to make sure that everybody can be part of it, I am running 2 different times. So basically it's going to be at 9 in the morning for me and at 9 at night, just basically like the same time we are right now. It's going to be the last session, and the first one is going to be 12 hours before this one. So I'm going to be sending out an email with details about it, how to join. It's going to be a different session, and I'm going to be posting in the group as well. So make sure you have something available. It's like it can be anything. A model we started before by doing the offline classes, or something you're doing during this class. It's like anything you have, or even something you did in the past. It's like if you have something to put in there, just make sure it's just one model so you don't steal it's like time from the other students. But if you have one model, I'm going to try my best to actually help with whatever I can. You had a question, right?
It was about the one model.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's like in the past I would do like, it's like let's go over, but then it becomes too long for the other people. But if you have something, for example, let's say like the most important one, bring to the class, the one you have more trouble with. And the other one you can post like in our group, and then we try to comment on it, Yep. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Have a nice one.
And you. Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Sorry for the rants today.
Thank you. Good night.
It's all good fun, man.
Right. See you, dude.
Enjoy the rants more.
Yeah.
We're all humans.
Oh no, I'm gonna ban you now.
There you go.